Thank you very much, Michelle and Tom and Chrissy and Mike for putting this together and for letting me be with you. And Tom, I appreciate the challenge. These are extraordinary times that we're living in. And I thank everybody for taking some of that time to get on the phone. I wish I were able to see you. Frankly, I wish I were able to be with you because the eggs and bacon are always really good, but among others. But the truth of the matter is, I think we all are ready to try to spend more time with each other. It's, these, as I said, these are extraordinary times, and certainly things that most of us have never seen. I've been around for a while now. I've seen, I've seen the economic challenges of the gas crisis. I waited in line to get gas so I could go take my LSATs, and I've lived through presidential assassinations and wars, and this is in many ways even more daunting in that there's nothing most of us can do other than to stay home, try to avoid contact, which is unnatural, I think, in some respects, certainly for many of the people on this phone who have made a career and built great success around their interpersonal skills. And it's something I think we all look forward to getting back to being able to do. Although my guess is this is true for all of you, and it is candidly true for me too. I don't miss having multiple events every night of the week. I do enjoy the fact that I can be at home. I've eaten dinner together with my wife and the one son who still lives here, I guess for 6 weeks in a row now, and they haven't kicked me out, so that's good. But it's a nice experience, and playing more board games and watching movies and things like that, I guess, have brought us all home. And I've taken more walks in the last 6 weeks than I probably did in the 6 months or so before that. So those are the little bit of good things. But the truth of the matter is, these challenging times bring out the best in all of us, I think. And I think that's true universally. We saw it in Sandy. We see it whenever there's a natural disaster. I think we're seeing it now. I see people come together, helping each other. I look to the private sector who answered the call when we were so challenged as a state to get the PPE that the frontline healthcare workers so desperately needed. The private stock supply was kicked into gear, and so many, probably some of you on this phone call, were able to help out in that cause, and those kind of things make a difference. And I think people recognize that their duty may simply be to stay at home and help flatten that curve. And I think overwhelmingly, people have responded to that and have been doing their job. They've recognized what's essential, and we've worked together. And I think working together, Tom, you talked about it at the top. I think that is so true, more true now than ever. And I think what you're seeing now in Trenton is a spirit of cooperation. I think there's been great cooperation among the front office and the Senate President, the Senate and the Assembly. And I know personally that I have had a tremendous experience working with my colleague and friend, John Bramnick. He has been nothing short of a great partner, and we have worked together. And I think that's something that we plan on building on as we go forward. We've had a couple of Zoom cocktail hours together with members, and I think we're going to look to extend those kind of things. It just brings people together. And despite the physical challenges that we faced in terms of not being able to be together, which has been no small feat for all of us as we try to craft an agenda that recognizes those things that are important for the people of New Jersey and try to respond to things as they come along. I think back to when we started on March 16th. It was originally scheduled to be a committee day, and recognizing that this pandemic effect was coming faster than we want, we converted it over to a voting session, and began the process of putting things in place that were going to set a tone and to set a foundation for the things that were going to come in the future. And if you recall, we did things like allowing the remote school instructions to count towards the 180-day requirement. We established funds to give schools money to do deep cleanings. There was certainly a hope and maybe even a little expectation we'd be back before the end of the school year. We continued to protect our citizens, especially those most in need, by making sure that we continued free and reduced lunches. But we also looked to other people too to make sure. And the first bill, we actually passed a bill back then. The governor has since extended, I guess we did it by bill actually, to move the tax filings back. We pushed it back initially not to be later than June 30th, trying to keep things within this budget year. And we'll talk a little bit about the fact that we've extended that as we go forward. And we also established a fund to support small businesses. The goal at the time was to try to keep businesses as best we could open and operating, and to keep people on the payroll. That was the initial goal. Now EDA now has, I think, about $75 million in a fund that is designed to help small businesses and businesses to keep going. But candidly, the initial goal was not achieved as we quickly went into a situation where businesses began to shut down and people were laid off. And we all know what's happened since. I think perhaps certainly one of the most, if not the most important bill that we passed that day was the one to allow ourselves to vote remotely. We were still struggling with how we managed social distance and how we were able to continue to operate governmentally because it's necessary and because we needed to make sure that we were continuing to do our job as legislators. And since then, we've had a few sessions. We're going to have one next week. Again, voting sessions. We do it by phone. We've built in securities to make sure that only members get on. We've done things to make sure that we've stayed in a pretty narrow alley. All the bills that we've done, there probably is an exception. So I don't want to say all of them, but although I can't think of one, have been focused purely on addressing the coronavirus matters. We've done what we believe we could to give people time to pay things. We've done things to allow the citizens to continue to remain in their home. We've done things to try to help support people who are really continuing to struggle. And we're going to continue to do those things. I know there's a bill on it's tomorrow, right? It's going to set a committee day tomorrow, where we will consider a bill that allows for $100 million to be sent to help people pay rent. Now that helps people stay in. It also helps landlords because those folks continue to face the challenge of having to meet a mortgage payment. And the governor has done good work at trying to help people who have mortgages get some time to do that. But we still need to continue to try to maintain the economy as best we can, because that's the only way we're going to get out of this mess. So the other things that we've done, and I alluded to it before, we extended. What we've done is we've extended this fiscal year by 3 months through the end of September. And then we'll have a 9-month budget to put us back on cycle for next June. So the good news is no one's 4th of July will be adversely affected by a potential government shutdown. The unfortunate part is that almost all the fireworks that at least I love to go to have been canceled. But the real goal of doing that for me was to give ourselves a chance to assess in a more meaningful way with more real data the things the impact of this coronavirus. Now we know some of those things right now, that we know unemployment is rampant. We know businesses are stretched to the point of merely hoping to hang on for survival. So understanding that the true gravity of the situation, I think, is going to be useful. It also allows us to see what federal aid we're going to get. And I think, and I hope, and this is Craig Coughlin's great hope, that we will start to see some bit of a recovery as we get into the mid-late summer, and then we can assess and get better revenue projections before we head into making the final budget. We know there's been an unprecedented economic impact that resulted from the fight against the coronavirus, and in a positive and hopeful news, it seems like the curve is flattening. It seems that we're making real inroads as the result of the discipline that people have followed in trying to avoid coming into contact with others, and the precautionary steps that most people are taking. I guess if you head on to walk into a business at some time in the not too distant past with a mask on and gloves, the security guard would come over and try to find out who the heck you were. And now it's commonplace. But the truth of the matter is that the consciousness of people has really made an impact and a difference, and an overwhelming majority of people are complying to try and get that done. Of course, despite that that hopeful news, there is real challenges. As I said, unemployment unprecedented. 930,000 New Jerseyans at last time I checked have filed for unemployment. It has strained the system beyond comprehension, I think, and has really posed challenges for the people who are going to receive that. They may be eligible for unemployment, but as you know, the system, no system that we could have would be designed for that kind of tsunami. And some of the technology is old, and we need to work through that. But it's just the sheer volume. Now, I'm hopeful that people get their unemployment sooner rather than later, because I think, and my concern is that so many people don't have enough savings to help them go in the long term, and so we're going to need to continue to find ways to help. We're also going to have to find ways, Tom, to your point, to figure out how to help businesses get back on their feet. And one of the things I think is the most challenging is that at this time when we need to be able to provide more assistance across the board, the governor rightfully is saying we're bleeding money, and we know that revenues have fallen off a cliff. So that poses some real challenges, and what we do to continue to balance those needs of people and businesses. How do we do it? Well, I think first thing we have to do is get open, and I think the governor set out a responsible, very responsible plan to do just that as we walk through this, based on data and statistics and with the strong input of science and public health officials. So that will, ultimately it's going to be New Jersey getting back to business, back to operation and normal. That will change things, but how we get there, because I can't imagine a round two of this. Now, all of the information I have seems to say that the World Health Organization and others seem to believe that there may very well be a second round of this, but I can't imagine what that would be like. And so, to the extent we can be successful in beating this back, I think we're going to be better. And I think there's some other things we have to do. The governor is asking us to consider a borrowing proposal to help us get through these next 3 months. That certainly merits consideration. I think we have to. He's frozen spending. He's frozen about $1 billion in spending, and I think the 3-month spending plan that we put in place needs to be tight, responsible, those kind of things. I think the same thing we'll see in crafting a 9-month budget. I think, well, clearly one of the things that would be most helpful is if the federal government, who has made a big commitment to supporting the recovery effort, would come through with some real money, and that New Jersey would get its fair share of those funds. And I think if we can do that, then we can be in a much better place. The key there is flexibility. You know, we had an initial surge of money, I think about $1.7 billion or $1.8 billion in the CARES Act that Congress enacted, and then it seemed that at one point and then they put restrictions on it, which would make it much more difficult, if not impossible, for us to use for most things. Seems like that has been loosened. The governor's worked hard with the federal government to try and do that. And I think we may have heard some hopeful news about that. I haven't seen it in writing yet, but that would be very helpful. I know our congressional delegation is working hard to help us, and I think the country needs to recognize that we're a sending state. So at this time, when we need it more than some other states who have, fortunately, have had less of the virus and consequently less of an impact, it's time for us to get the kind of help that we need. But I think we can, do what we can to set our eyes towards taking measures that can jumpstart the economy. And I think that's where we need to start to focus our energy and attention next. Where do we go? How do we get things working? And I have finalizing a panel that will work with the Assembly leadership to find ways to help invigorate the economy. Now, I think that the answer can't simply be that we need more money. If that's the case, then we really have a challenge, because, as I said, we're at a time when we need to help more people. Our resources are even more strained. And so I was fortunate enough to have George Zoffinger. Many of you probably know his name. He's an extraordinarily accomplished New Jersey businessman, helped lead the renaissance of New Brunswick, which I'm so proud of. Was responsible for bringing the World Cup in 1994, I believe it was, and has a stellar reputation in business community. And so George will lead the team of people who cross the spectrum, things like education and manufacturing, healthcare, construction, tourism, business, all of those things that I think we need to have a plan and hopefully have some innovative ideas and ways to help the economy get rolling again. I also think we need to find ways to make sure that we understand the pitfalls, and so that's where I think that we're going to, of any proposal we have, because folks who live things know them best. So for all of you who are out there listening, I don't pretend to know your industry to the depth that you do. I may know a little bit about it and try to stay educated, but the truth is the day-to-day inner workings are something that only you know best. And so that's where I think our our committee chairs, who I'm going to rely on heavily, will work through those issues with that, hopefully with some good ideas and new ideas from the panel. But I do believe this. I don't know where we'll end up, but I think the next budget is likely to be far different than the one that the governor presented on back in February. So, and I think one of the things we have to do there is make sure that we have the investments that we're making targeted, and where I believe we should start first and foremost, it should be on places where we can get people back to work. As we said, or as I said before, I think we all know this isn't a great revelation, that the economy is best when people are working and when they're out spending money. And we need to be able to get back to that point. So areas of the economy that are most likely to generate jobs, to bring people back sooner at full pay, so that they can get back on their feet, so that they can get back to the very robust economy we had just a few short months ago, will be the key. Now, it's not going to be easy. And it'll never be as fast as we hope. I wish we could just flip the button and say, wow, as quickly as this came, it went, and now everybody's back to normal. But I think there's going to be a new normal, and I think all of us kind of recognize that just for our own personal safety, as we become more comfortable from standing further away from people in the line at the grocery store, and taking protective measures. And I don't know if any group of people has ever washed their hands more than the people of the Northeast, at least nowadays. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of hard work, and it's going to test our resolve and that spirit of cooperation that we have experienced. But I'm confident, and I suspect all of you are as well, that the virus will end and that we will overcome those challenges. And I look forward to those good days where we're not talking solely about how we get through something, but rather how we move forward. And so, thank you for letting me be with you. I'd love to hear your concerns and see if you have any questions. And thanks for having me, everybody. Okay.
Well, thank you, Speaker, for joining us this morning. Thank you for all of your efforts. Yeah, I think many of us would love to join folks on a happy hour. Zoom is the new way of life for all of us these days, and so while we're not traveling from meeting to meeting, I think we're virtually traveling from meeting to meeting, discussing a lot of different things. And I know from BIA's perspective, we conducted a poll, and 70% of our members said that they can open up safely adhering to CDC guidelines. Additionally, we have been working with your team, as well as the Senate President and the Governor's office, on a recovery effort, having over 80 business associations joining a force together in a coalition to put together recommendations on how to recover. To your point, you said that, getting into some of the industry-specific issues and challenges, folks need to be educated on. And so we have provided over to our policymakers a framework for that recovery. And we stand willing and waiting to continue to have that conversation about how we do safely open. With that being said, we are encouraged to hear that we're starting to talk a lot more about the recovery effort, and know that the business community does want to work collaboratively with all. I do know as well that on the federal level, there has been CARES Act funding that has been appropriated to the state of New Jersey. I know also that money has to be spent on COVID-related expenditures. And with that being said, I know the business community has applied for grants at EDA, applied for federal loans as well, and all programs have been depleted at this point. And so we know that they need to get resources as soon as possible. what can we do to further get resources to the business community, because we have a quarter of our labor force on unemployment at this time, and we know that our small business, medium-sized business economy is the lifeblood of New Jersey. And so one of the things we've been asking for is to please use that federal CARES Act funding to get money to our small and medium-sized businesses as soon as possible. So again, that money is there. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how do we get these resources to our businesses as soon as possible.
Thanks, Chrissy. Look, I think that what we have to do is recognize the importance of having a thriving business community, and then try to do the tricky work of balancing that with the needs of citizens, because without citizens who are in a place to go out and buy goods and services, having the business doesn't it's two sides of an equation. If we only fill up one side, we haven't solved the problem. So what I think it takes is a commitment to making sure that we get resources to all the segments of the economy and to people, so that they can take advantage of those businesses that are available. Now, I think how we go about getting the resources is tricky. I think we need to depend on the federal government. I think this is our time of need. I think we need to figure out how to manage the resources that we have, and to try to make, as I said, wise investments in economies that are going to achieve getting people back to work. So I think we'll have the resources that we have. We're going through that. We'll have our own. They will grow as the economy grows, and that's why it's critical to recognize that the business community is at the center of making the economy grow, and so they've got to get the kind of resources they need to get up and going. But I think we all realistically need to understand that we're just not going to have enough money to solve every problem, and so that will be the challenge. How much, trying to get everybody enough or to get going and to get and be strong. That's going to be a real challenge, and what it takes is, as I said, a commitment and a willingness to recognize all of the elements that go into success.
Speaker, to Chrissy's point about the CARES Act money, I read the new Treasury information about relaxing the use of that money, and it specifically says that some of that money that the state has received can be used for grants, and not loans, but grants to small businesses. And at this time, during the survival phase of this recovery, the EDA provided a total of $5 million in grants, which went in about 2 hours. But there's $2 billion unaccounted for in the CARES Act money, a lot of which could be used for grants to really help companies right now during this survival phase. And again, grants, not loans, which is very important.
I agree, Tom. I couldn't agree more. Grants are what we need. Look, we've done a number of things, both on the side of giving residents breaks or pushing breaks in terms of the timing on payments. We've done that with businesses to some extent. But the truth of the matter is delaying things isn't as good as getting the real assistance you need, which is some cash to get through the time. Better you have it down the road, but I do worry that if things pile up, won't be able to get out of that hole. So there has to be that balance too. This is tricky stuff. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This is hard. It's hard for everybody, and they're hard decisions that we're going to have to make. because I think it's true. It certainly, if you would hear my phone conversations day in and day out, you would agree that there are challenges in every phase of life in the state of New Jersey, and almost all of them revolve around having resources to get through this and to thrive as they once were. So, the truth of the matter is we've got to try and find ways to do what we can, recognize what the levels are that are necessary, and then try to achieve that.
Hey, Speaker, this is Michael Egginson.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, sir. First, I want to commend you, and I see there's a new initiative, well, not new to you. I know you've been working on anti-hunger initiatives, and I want to give you kudos to the partnership you're doing with Port Authority Chairman Kevin O'Toole on the Feed New Jersey campaign and helping out the soup kitchens. I know that's near and dear to your heart, so I want to give you kudos for that. Looking at the questions that we're getting, go ahead.
I said not just now. That doesn't stop. We have too many. We start off with one out of every 8 people in New Jersey who face food instability. So, and that's when the economy was rolling.
Yes, I just wanted to point that out because I know, again, it's a high priority for you. I'm trying to consolidate some of the questions that we're getting from the audience. Looks like we're getting a number regarding child care centers and getting some kind of timeline guidance and support on the centers, and hopefully receiving priority and keeping our youngest citizens safe and healthy. So they're looking. A lot of folks are looking for timing and what's next for those child care centers.
Yeah. So look, I recognize how important that is and how important having child care services as we get back to business, so to speak, in order to be allowed to free people up to go back and do their jobs. We want to get people back to work. We have to make sure they're able to get there. And so, again, this is one of those tricky balancing situations where you have to balance that with making sure that we keep children safe. And unfortunately, the lion's share of people who were attacked by the coronavirus were not kids. But that doesn't mean all of them weren't, and that doesn't mean that we don't need to be mindful of not trying to create a situation where that they're at risk going forward. So I think that, the governor has worked hard to try to take into account balancing those kind of things. I don't know of a time frame yet, and I had talked to him about that. Candidly, I'm not sure that he knows when the public health officials will say, look, we can do this. But I do know, as a citizen and from talking to people who depend on it, that it is very much needed, and of course, certainly for business owners, it's critical. So I think that needs to be one of the things that has to be prioritized in terms of getting back to work.
Assembly Speaker, I want to stay on safety and opening safely for a moment. This is because in our survey, we heard again, many feel that they can open safely, and we know that's still a matter of timing for sure. We have best practices here in the state, but there are some best practices nationally that perhaps we could look to as well. I have the opportunity to sit on a weekly call through the National Association of Manufacturers with the Council of State Manufacturing Associations, and the executives of all of those associations across the state share best practices. And this idea of opening safety is the idea of having a risk assessment tool for each of the businesses. We want our customers to know that it's safe to come into our place of business. And if we could show or post to that, we have some type of an objective tool that measures by way of where we are regionally, what our sector has by way of what we offer by way of products and services and how those go to vulnerability or not, and the type of health data within our region. Wisconsin has developed a pretty nice tool that in partnership with their Department of Health that recognizes the health aspects, the geographic aspects, and the vertical sector aspects. And then you get an assessment out of it based on rating. You can then see the we're doing in order to be safe. And so we talk about collaboration within the state, which is so significantly important, but there are best practices you may want to look at outside of the state as well. And I hope that you would consider things like that. I know you would consider things like that. Maybe in fact you already are.
Well, yeah. Look, I mean, I think that there will be a new norm, as you know, everybody recognizes, and relying on good ideas that are, particularly if they've proven to be successful. You know, it may be too early to have true data, but I believe you were fading in and out a little bit, Michelle. So I think I have most of it. But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to working with nationally established best practices and having people have a guide to what to be relying on, you know, and targeting themselves as they get ready to get back to work. That I think that is an area where we should look to cooperate, and people will, you know, those are the kind of things I think we need to do that, you know, perhaps in the past we didn't consider enough, but that's certainly something we can look to work to do.
Thank you.
Speaker, let me ask one question, please. It's kind of a concern I have. I fully appreciate your need to set up your group, and I've worked in the past in my banking career with George Zoffinger, and he's a guy who is known to be able to get results facing difficult situations. So you made a good choice there. But my problem is that you all have your committee, Chrissy and Michelle's coalition, which has put out some very fine recommendations, have their recommendations out there. The governor is putting together an advisory panel that's going to be announced, I think, today. So a third competing organization for addressing recovery. And the problem I have is we have to work together. And each of these groups is going to put together their own agenda. Then it's going to take time for the groups to come together and work. And time is our enemy here. So, you know, this is something we can't let happen this go around, because it's just too important for us to get back to recovery as soon as possible.
Well, look, I don't think that there's any prohibition on working expeditiously, and I don't think there's any limitation on good ideas. But I do agree with you, Tom, that they're being able to synthesize how we put together all of those good ideas, and then having a healthy debate over which ones work. They may be competing, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, there's no pure roadmap for this. If there was, we'd all have embraced it by now. And so I agree with you that we need to work together. I agree with you that we need to do this thing in a timely manner. But I think we can achieve both of those things.
Thanks. Let's hope for that.
Speaker, and to that end, I agree on the collaboration perspective, and glad to hear that everybody can work together. You know, the front office, your delegation, as well as with the Senate, so critical at this point in time. And again, the business community's goal during this is to open safely, and to be mindful of how we're also going to balance the health and safety of our patrons, how we're going to balance the health and safety of our employees, and also to make sure that when the business does open, that they are able to open safely and not be open to, you know, potential, you know, challenges from litigation, et cetera. And so this balance is going to be so critical as we move forward, because all of these pieces need to interact simultaneously. And as the legislature continues to meet, and I do need to give a shout out to your team, as I always do, who is always accessible to hearing from us, that the balance between all of this and all of these different parameters is going to be critical to passing public policy. And I know that different pieces of legislation are posted, and I think our ask of you, the Senate, and of the governor is to make sure that we're taking in all of these various components to protect everybody, and that to make sure this policy is well thought out, because no one does have all of the answers, as you alluded to. And so that dialogue is so critically important as we move forward. And trying to do this all remotely, of course, is a unique challenge in and of itself. And so that conversation is something that we welcome, and want to make sure that we're as responsive to you as you set policy moving forward, so that we can recover as expeditiously as possible. So that collaboration you mentioned between all various groups who are trying to step up and be problem solvers, while also making sure that we get the unemployment benefits to folks. I know that they've been waiting. I know the DOL is working around the clock to help them, to make sure our businesses get the funding they need, to make sure employees are safe, to make sure the employers are safe. It's just going to be such a critical conversation moving forward. And so that collaboration is key, certainly.
Well, thanks for the kind words about my team, Chrissy, and thank you too, and the folks on your end for always being available and always being open-minded and understanding the balancing things that we often have to do and the challenges that we face. So I think we do have a good working relationship, and look forward to continuing that during this incredibly critical time.
Speaker, going along with the questions that we're getting here, do you see infrastructure playing a role as we come out of this pandemic crisis, both on the utility side and the roads and bridges? And particularly, do you see an emphasis on utilizing public-private partnerships going forward?
So thanks, Michael. I think absolutely that projects, infrastructure projects, will be critical to the recovery process. As I said, they're real investments. They create lots of jobs, and I think that they will be they'll be part of that. I've always been a fan of public-private partnerships. I was supportive of that bill from the very start. We got a bill done that did just that. So I think that is one of the areas that we can look to try to help jumpstart the economy as we go forward.
Let's see here. What is your stance on the constitutionality of Governor Murphy's executive orders? Are you interested in balancing the powers of Jersey's executive branch?
Well, I mean, of course, is the simple answer to that. We have the legislature has an important and critical role and a constitutional role in the state, but I believe that the governor has stayed within the bounds of the authority granted to him under the acts so far. And so I stand second to none in my understanding of what the legislature's role is and caring about that. I think we're okay for now.
Okay, as we come back from the crisis, companies will need to divert funds to put systems in place to protect the employers. Do you foresee grants funding for these types of initiatives?
Grants funding for those kind of initiatives, right? Is that the question, Tom? Or Mike?
Yes. Reading it as it comes in.
Yeah. Well, no, it's fine. Look, I think as I said before, I would prefer grants over loans at every time we can. The question is, do we have the available resources to do that? It's that simple and that hard.
Right. Speaking of the collaboration with the federal government and the PPP and the like, I know you're aware of this, but whatever supplemental advocacy you and the Senate President, the governor can provide to our congressional delegation. One grouping that has not received critical funding are the nonprofits, 501c6s. So just want to continue to make you aware of that and any inroads and influence that you have working collaboratively with our congressional members in New Jersey. They're very supportive of that. We'd like to see that. And as you know, that's the framework of all the local regional chambers of commerce throughout New Jersey.
Speaker, we've had some questions also about what to expect with the state budget, moving forward, the 3 months you alluded to, as well as next fiscal year's budget. There's a real opportunity here to really take a hard look at the budget for moving forward. A lot of conversations have taken place prior to this pandemic about the sustainability of New Jersey's budget and how we utilize both cuts, borrowing, and spending. So is there anything that you can share as we actually head into June 30th? Believe it or not, I can't believe it's May already, about what to expect and how some certain conversations might be going, because I think what we're also trying to get our arms around is, where are we currently, with revenues coming in? We obviously know we're down, don't get me wrong, but what is the expectation for that budget gap heading into those 3 years, and how are conversations progressing as we enter into the first round of the budget discussion and then going into our fiscal year discussion as well?
So look, I think that the honest answer is we don't quite yet know what the revenue has been like, right? March was a partially normal month or half normal month. April will be a better measure of what the revenue projections look like, and therefore what the position is, relative to things going forward. As I said, the governor has frozen spending. As I said, I think we need to be, cautious as we move forward. I've always been one that says we start working on the expense side and then work our way back. So I think that we'll look at all of those things. But I think that anybody who tells you right now, they can tell you what the budget will look like in October is probably just doing that based on what they believe will happen. And so I think before we have any real meaningful discussions around that, I think we need to get a little bit, a lot of bit more data, and really have an understanding of what the position is that we're in. Some of the challenges we know, right? 930,000 people on unemployment, any number of businesses closed that we hope will come back. So we know we need to find resources for that. But in terms of saying, look, here's where I think we can, here's what the revenue is going to be like. I think one thing is for certain is that the budget won't look like the budget that the governor submitted in February, because we're going to have to do things that I think will be challenging in this budget, and and as we go through it, we'll have more information, and of course the role the federal government will play in sending support will be critical in that analysis. But I got time for about one more question if we can. I know we got started a little late, but I got some other things that I got to get on another call.
Got it. Speaker, it's Mike Egginton. Just you mentioned the unemployment insurance, and obviously I was involved through the state chamber and BIA working on when the financial crash happened in 2008 and 9. We helped build solvency back in the UI fund, as you know. We also passed legislation to constitutionally protect it, which was all good. It could have been a worst case situation, obviously knowing the magnitude of people that are looking for unemployment insurance. I just want you to keep in mind that the two organizations are there when you and your team and Chairman Egan and Chairman Madden are ready to look at the UI fund and obviously, as you know, that's paid through the payroll tax. So we would like to have that, seat at the table to have those discussions with you and the leadership as we look to rebuild the UI fund after this.
Yeah, I mean, look at how we're going to deal with the unemployment fund as we go forward. I think is one of the things that we absolutely have to pay attention to. There are triggers in effect to make sure that the trust is secure, but we have to be mindful of, we don't want to crush people, because of the unprecedented surge. So I look forward to your input on that one there, Michael.
Speaker, just to add to that, the CARES Act relaxation of funding to the state also specifies, I believe, that some of that money can be used to shore up the unemployment funds within the states.
That's good. That's good news, Tom.
Yeah, and furthermore, Speaker, just the importance of that intersection between the PPP program on the federal level that many of our members have taken, and not knowing when the state will officially open has put them in a bit of a quandary there, and really a stressful situation. So that intersection between our federal programs and when the state opens is going to be critical. I know we've been advocating for our congressional delegation to relax some of those requirements under the PPP program to extend the deadlines. And so any advocacy your team, you and your caucus can provide would be helpful to the business community. Again, not knowing when we're going to reopen. A lot of folks went out for a lot of grant and loan programs and want to make sure that they're used as effectively as possible. And right now, I know a lot of our members are having some challenges. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, the importance of that state and federal intersection between programs.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chrissy. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate being with you. I'm sorry I couldn't see you, but I look forward to the time when we're all able to be together again, and I look forward to working together to make sure that we get to put New Jersey in the best place we can to succeed and to get back to normal as fast as we can. So thanks again, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody, for being on.